think that I would really think that it's very important right at the beginning. So like even at one time when we're discussing, we're saying that even at the background, you should briefly tell us about which theory is your study inclined in. You should also be able to tell us how does that theory relate with your study. Even at the problem statement, if you are going the traditional, you should be able to look at that. What are the controversies within view of the theory, and then you find that you are able to contextualize your study appropriately. I think for now, I know other colleagues will be able to support, to put more insight, but I think that can really, to me, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Any supplement from the senior colleagues? Professor Roy would like to talk about theory. We have discussed theory here for quite some time. But of course, if there's any question, we can actually supplement and add on something. There's something from Aggie B. How do you choose the theories? What is the key strategy? I think Aggie had a question on how to choose the theory. Dr. Ruth, yes, your hand is up. You can make
Thank you.
supplement.
May I always use my experience answering Aggie? To choose a theory, when you've read literature review, you will identify a theoretical gap. What do I mean? Of course, when you're reading literature, you're looking at people who have researched in your area. So which theory did they use? I was looking at maternal health utilization, and Anderson's healthcare utilization model or theory is widely used. That is how I picked my theory. That was one. Secondly, I used the theory of personal behavior. It's also mostly used in maternal health. So basically, when you read literature review, you will see what other scholars in your area used as a theory. Otherwise, it is hard to invent a wheel. Then peace. In your area of study health, yeah, it becomes hard because theory guides in practice. Basically, it helps in getting, you look at the variables, you identify the gap. So you can even get a theory, like I used an institutional theory. It is mostly used in other areas of study. But I brought it in my area to say that yes, government has put formal and informal rules that women should go for services, but do they go for them? No. This theory looks at only formal and the rules, normatives, cognitive pillars, but they don't consider personal behavior. So I think you can get a theory and see how it fits in your study. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ruth. I hope there is... Yes, Professor Rolla.
Dr. Michael Okoche did justice to the question. I see Susan Watundo's hand up. I'll just add to say that when you talk about a theory basically tries to explain why B happens. Why does B happen? It happens because of A. It happens because of A. And A happens in a manner like X, Y, Z. So it basically tells you why things are going on, the way they are doing, and how they go on. So as you read about the theories, you get to understand. For example, you're looking at the theory of reason action. The theory of reason action will tell you that people behave the way they do because of certain factors. And those factors are well highlighted in that particular theory. One of the factors that come out strongly in that theory is attitude of the people towards a certain behavior, subjective norms, So as you read the theories, don't focus on picking out a concept. Understand the arguments. Understand the main arguments posited by the theories. You know, when people come here to present their theoretical framework, I get lost. You will not get it right if you do not know, or if you have failed to understand the main argument of the theory. What is the main argument of that theory? Is it institutional theory? Is it agency theory? Is it whatever theory? What theory have you identified in the literature? Yes, that is concerned with your study, yes, but go into digging in depth the main arguments. Once you get the main arguments, you'll be able to identify, number one, what the theory explains, what it uses to explain, and then the assumptions. Once you've understood these, then it will be easy for you to apply in your study. I see oftentimes people force theories into their study. It's not a matter of forcing theories. I would urge everyone on the call to listen to the YouTube messages by Professor Tai. I think he has 4 lectures on theory building, theory testing, what is a theory, and all those. He has them. Please, please, please endeavor to read those. I found them very rich. Once you read them, you'll be able to, maneuver around it. That's it from me. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Professor Rola Orobia, for that wonderful supplement on the issue of theory. Of course, many of you are aware that those who have been here, we have dealt with theory for a long period of time. And we have discussed it widely, but I mean, there's no harm in answering questions related to theory. I hope there is nothing on theory, because we shall leave that part and we go to, but there's the third question is also on theory. And the question is saying that anchoring the study on theory and testing theory in research, how are these two different? Anchoring the study on theory and testing theory in research, how are these two different? Are they just words, or there is a scientific way of doing it? Let me begin with Professor Michael Koche. Michael, please, you can make a comment.
Okay, thank you so much. I think like Professor Laura said, and I really believe that for the benefit of all of us in this platform, some of the things have really been dealt with, and I think the YouTubes by Professor Joseph Tai, actually it goes deeper in most of these issues. But for the sake of this discussion, I want to say that somebody who is anchoring his study on a theory critically identifies the concepts as the theory, or the variables as the theory as said, and on the basis of those concepts, and then the critical understanding of the theory uses that to carry out a study. Somebody who is testing a theory basically tries to understand the environment, all those issues, how somebody arrived at a theory, and then in another setting carries out the same. And most times this is because, of course, like all this positivism comes from pure and natural science. So you find that it is possible in natural science for us to test some things. Like if we have discovered a drug, we can again test on another setting. So testing a theory is basically so, but also in management science, there are some theories which even somebody after arriving at a theory, we will have the questionnaires, we will have all. So then eventually you use the same questionnaire, use all the, as the theory basically stipulated, then you test in another environment. So when somebody is testing a theory, you are trying to prove whether the theory is we are trying to see whether that theory is applicable in a different setting. It's different from anchoring your study, where you are just basically picking the critical aspects of the theory and use them for your study. That's the way I would look at the two. So I think let me leave my colleagues also to advance that. But as you are saying, anchoring your study on a theory, and I want to say something which actually Professor Laura highlighted. Understanding the argument of the theory, identifying the critical concepts as advanced by the theory, identifying the critical assumptions of the theory. So when somebody is anchoring his study, he has fairly understood the concepts which the theory has really highlighted. He has also understood the assumptions of the theory, and he picks up those concepts to apply in his study, bearing in mind the assumptions. So, so you're anchoring your study on that theory because you're using the concepts, you have identified the assumptions which are applicable to you, and then now you're anchoring your study on it. But somebody who is testing the theory, he picks the theory as it is and applies it in his setting. And like if you look at some of the theories, actually, even the people who advance them will even provide for you a questionnaire. And then you just basically use the same thing, and then you test it, use the same circumstance of an analysis, and then you be able to say that, yes, I think this theory is still relevant, or this theory is not relevant in these circumstances. So I think I could stop there and let me leave my colleagues and other senior colleagues to be able to advance. But the two are related, but also different. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael Koche. Any supplement from the senior colleagues? On theory, there's one that is close, but I think I would request also Professor Rolla to come in also here, and Professor and Dr. Susan Watundu, because the three areas are merged now. Somebody is asking a question. I would also like to know the difference between theory, theoretical model, and conceptual framework. Theory, theoretical model, and conceptual framework. I know Professor Rai on this platform is the master and the guru of conceptual frameworks, interpreting conceptual frameworks. He has told us, he has given us literature to go and read on how to interpret conceptual frameworks and how these arrows move from here and there. But now there is a question that combines all: theory, theoretical model, and conceptual framework. I don't know where I can start from, but let me begin with Dr. Michael, then I'll invite Professor Rolla to give a comment again, and Dr. Susan Watundu. Dr. Michael.
Okay, thank you. The issue is a theoretical model, a conceptual, and then you come back again, Doctor.
The issue is theory, the difference between theory, theoretical model, and conceptual framework. How are they related? How are they different?
Okay. Like we say, what embodies a theory is basically somebody is proposing how things work, and it gives you what the theory is proposing, Like institutional theory basically says there are formal and informal institutions. Then also gives you assumptions underlying the theory. But a theoretical model is basically how the variables are relating. So it shows you how basically a frame which tries to articulate in a diagrammatic form how the concepts as articulated by the theory relate with each other. When you talk about a conceptual framework, and a conceptual framework based on review of literature, based on review of the so many theories, somebody now constructs a relationship between the concepts. Like somebody who has anchored his study on two theories, he picks up maybe two concepts, maybe from this theory and maybe one concept from the other theory, and then he builds a conceptual model, how those concepts are relating with each other. But also somebody who has read literature based on understanding of literature can construct a conceptual framework on how these concepts relate with each other. There is a major issue sometimes I've found where people think that you just begin sitting down and begin constructing concepts based on your mind. Somebody sits down, and I think that's the major issue most times we experience. So you find somebody sitting down and he begins imagining how concepts are relating with each other and just construct his conceptual framework. But it's a construction of how concepts relate with each other based on sound literature. Maybe you clearly see from theories and then all through from the different literature. So a theory is basically can be a write-up, but now when you talk about a model or a framework, that now shows you how these concepts are conjured. I think that's how I could state it. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Panelists, any contribution to this question? Because there are more questions related to this that are coming in the chat. Panelist, Professor Rolla, Dr. Susan, Professor Rolla and Dr. Susan, any comment on this? Right.
Thank you,
Yes.
moderator.
Yes, Professor.
Dr. Koche has just said it. Theoretical framework. Yeah. A theoretical framework is that structure that can hold or support a theory of a research study. It basically is, you know, what it spells out the theories that you're going to use to support your study. It could be one, it could be two, it could be three. So that's why it's called a framework. A framework, the existing theories that are going to explain or support your study. Then for the conceptual framework, it's a construction of the relationship between your concepts. So it's a diagrammatic display of relationships between the study concepts. How do you build your theoretical framework? How do you build your conceptual framework? This comes from a review of theories. It comes from a review of theories. So here, what will distinguish the two is theoretical framework emphasizes a review of theories. Then the conceptual framework emphasizes, you know, how you're putting the concepts together in a relationship. But what I want to add there is the conceptual framework can also come from a review of theories. It can also be developed from a review of theories. So do not take it that what you put under theoretical framework is totally different from what you put under conceptual framework. Conceptual framework is the construction of relationship between variables, and these can also be seen in the theoretical framework. What is different here is that in the theoretical framework, you're basically expounding on the theories that support your study. And then in the conceptual framework, you're just telling us how the whole thing moves from one variable to the other. You're putting up a display of the relationship between your concepts. And you also go ahead to, operationalize your variables. Yeah, that's what I can say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Rolla. Dr. Susan, your hand is up. On the same.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Just like the previous speakers have mentioned, both conceptual and theoretical frameworks are based on theory. You must have reviewed theory that should inform your theoretical and conceptual frameworks. But in addition, maybe I'll speak in the line of economists, but in addition, theoretical and concept for theoretical framework, it will give you all the ideas as you have reviewed from the theory. Maybe if you're looking at performance, maybe you want to assess determinants of performance and the theory that informs your study. The theoretical framework will give you all the possible aspects that can define your study, or can inform your study basing on your what we call the dependent variable. And but when we go to conceptual framework, you will pick out what is specific to your study, how you've understood what can actually inform your study. It's like you in the conceptual framework, you don't have to have everything that you've got from theory. The theoretical framework is a bigger picture. But in economics, for example, we emphasize more of a theoretical framework. In economics, is a kind of a mathematical approach on how you derive the relationship between the variables that you're studying, or how your dependent variable is defined. So it's a mathematical way of expressing your intended study, or on about your variable of interest. So, and we prefer that in economics. So I hope I've added value to that. Thank you.
Okay, I think
There is Godwin. There is Godwin. I can see his hand up.
Okay, Dr. Godwin, please make a contribution on this. Dr. Godwin, sir, your hand is up.
Thank you, Dr. Warugembe. Probably I would like to concur with my colleagues and say that normally when you review literature, I mean, when you review the theories, normally there are concepts that emerge from the theories that you review. And the conceptual framework is normally derived from those concepts that have emerged. So a conceptual framework, in my view, is a diagrammatic representation of the concepts that you have derived from the review of your from the review of the theories. So probably I would concur with the colleagues that a conceptual framework is a diagrammatic representation of the concepts, or what we can call the variables that you have derived from the review of your theories. That is probably the contribution. That's what I can add on what has already been said. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dr. Godwin.
Chair, a short one.
Yes, yes, Dr.
Yeah,
Susan.
thank you. Just as Dr. Godwin has said, for a consumption framework, you can drive this framework from the different concepts that you've picked from different theories. But the theoretical framework, unlike for the conceptual framework, for a theoretical framework, you can use only one theory. It's not that you have to use one theory, but only one theory can serve the purpose for you to drive a theoretical framework.
Thank you, Susan. That is it.
Yes, Professor Rolla, I think thank you very much. That we have not gone to the level. Is Professor Rolla on? I hope I'm not interrupting her discussion.
Yes, Ahmed, what do you want me to do?
No, I hope I was not interrupting you when I came in.
No. I was just thanking Susan for her contribution.
Yeah, but there's something that came in at the end of Susan's submission, which I think we may not handle today, the issue of multiple theoretical approach. And let us leave it at that.
No. She said one theory can work. It depends on your study. For instance, if your study is anchored on the theory of reason action, when you read the main argument, all the concepts are there, the relationships are there. Even you can use that information to come up with your conceptual framework, and that's it. If your work is anchored on only the theory of reason action or theory of planned behavior or the unified something theory, which people use in IT to test or to explain adoption of something, So it depends on your study. You can use one theory, two theories, three theories, but it depends on your study. That's what I emphasize.
Thank you very much. Dr. Godwin, is this a new one or it's the
No. I want to supplement the Professor Rora and say that you can have multiple theories. You can as well have one theory, but the concepts that emerge from one theory or the multiple theories are the ones that come to construct the conceptual framework. So it does not matter how many theories you have. I believe you can have one theory and a number of variables can emerge, or a number of concepts, and those are the ones that you can use to construct your conceptual model. Alternatively, you can have a multi-theoretical approach where you have different theories and different concepts emerge from those theories, and those concepts are the ones that you use to construct your conceptual model. That is what I wanted to emphasize. It doesn't matter how many theories you have, but as long as concepts can emerge, those are the concepts that you are going to use to come up or to construct your conceptual model. members should not be really be confused that a conceptual framework necessarily needs to come from different theories, but the concepts can emerge from one theory, and you construct your conceptual model based on that theory. So it really depends on you. The concepts can emerge from multiple theories, the concepts can emerge from one theory, and those can be either, you can use them to construct a conceptual model. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Godwin. There's a question that came from Wilson. We have captured it, captured his issues on what guides the research information conceptual framework. We have dealt with that. Conceptual theoretical framework. Is it the theory of the variables and their measurements? We have talked about theory and conceptual framework and something on measurement of variables, measurement constructs is not actually being handled. I would propose that I bring in the second question and I invite the other set of questions, and I invite Professor Ola to react to it. Professor Ola, there is a question on how do I interpret the arrows in the conceptual framework? How do I interpret the arrows in the conceptual framework? Given that we are now dealing with the conceptual frameworks, we can finish this at once. How do I interpret the arrows in the conceptual frameworks? We can possibly react to that and also look at the issue of measurement constructs. Professor Ola, on your side now.
How do you interpret the arrows? Wow, what a question. But let me see. I'm trying to understand the question really. How do you interpret arrows in a conceptual framework? We already said a conceptual framework is a diagrammatic presentation of the relationship between your study variables. Diagrammatic presentation of relationship between your study variables. And that does what? That comes from a review of theoretical and empirical literature. That's why at the bottom of the theoretical framework, many people say this was developed from, source, developed from a review of theories and empirical literature, okay? So that's where it comes from. Now, when you're drawing your conceptual framework, you're basically telling us that, let's say your dependent variable is explained by X, Y, Z. Ahmed, I'll request for host rights so that I can share something small. I think I have some conceptual framework somewhere.
Professor, you have the host rights.
No, I don't. Do I have?
Okay. You have. Sure.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
I'm going to lay emphasis on the arrows. What was the question? How do we interpret the arrows?
Yes, in the framework.
I am still trying to understand that, but I hope in my sharing, I'll be able to explain. So now here we have a linear model. And we have an arrow going from attitude to intentions, then another arrow from social norms to intentions.
Professor, which framework are we looking at? You have three of them.
Professor, your frameworks are not being displayed.
Let me try and share again. Just a minute. Is there anything that you can see?
Yes, Prof, we can see the linear model.
Anything you can see?
Yes, we can see the linear model, Prof.
Are you seeing one conceptual framework or many?
Of course, you are not in the presentation mode, so we can see others in the other side.
I'm
But now we
wondering why, because on my side, I'm seeing only one slide.
and
Okay.
you are not in the presentation mode.
On my side, it is. I think it's the computer. I'm just wondering why it's doing that. Let me try to share again. If it's misbehaving, I'm not going to put it on slideshow. I'm going to attempt one more time. And if it's not going through.
No, Professor, I think that is okay.
It's okay now.
We can use that.
Okay, fine. Let's go by this. We have, the question was, how do we explain the arrows? Before you is a linear model. We have two arrows, one from attitude to intention to start, and another from social norms to intention to start. How do you interpret this? The interpretation here, I thought, really was straightforward. Here you're trying to say that there is a relationship between attitude and intention. There's a relationship between social norms and intention to start a business. And this conceptualization comes from the theory of reasoned action. And you can see the concepts here. They are referring, what is clear here is that they are unidimensional variables. So you're saying that attitudes and social norms are the independent variables, while intention to start is the dependent variable. So this study seeks to explain intentions to start a business using attitudes and social norms. Then we look at this particular conceptual framework. Can you see it?
Yes, Prof, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay, so again, now you see, I'm displaying the different ways we put these arrows. Still sticking to the question, how do we interpret the arrows? Someone can have just straight arrows like that, then another can have arrows in that format. What do they mean? We have three variables here, 2 independent and 1 dependent. So we have organizational support and psychological capital on one side. Those are the independent variables. Then we have employee engagement on the far end, that's the dependent variable. What do the arrows mean? That arrow you see from organization support going through to employee engagement, what does that mean? It means a direct relationship, yeah? A direct relationship between organization support and employee engagement. The same applies to that arrow from psychological capital to employee engagement. Then we have that arrow in between. It takes both organizational support and psychological capital. Then, you know, there's that straight arrow to employee engagement. What does this mean? It means that someone wants to test the combined relationship or the combined effect of organizational support and psychological capital in explaining employee engagement. So this is how you would you'd display. Remember, we said a conceptual framework, diagrammatic presentation of the relationship between our variables. So once I see such a model, I would also expect to see the research objectives emanating from this. Remember that every arrow here, I must be able to see the research objective or hypothesis or research questions. Already from here, there are 3 arrows, then we would expect to see 3 research objectives, minimum, okay? Minimum of 3 research objectives, because each arrow represents a relationship here. We are looking at relationships. So what about that? We also have conceptual frameworks like that. You see 2 arrows leading to that middle variable, then another one going out of it. So what do the arrows in this conceptual framework mean? One, there are direct relationships to be tested, and then there is the indirect relationship to be tested. So the direct relationships are, number 1, attitudes to actual startup. Then there's attitude to that arrow leading to intention. Then there's that arrow from intention to actual startup. There's another direct one, social norms to intentions, then social norms to actual. So in short, the arrows in this particular conceptual framework means the intention to test for the direct relationship between the variables and the indirect relationship. Because we have a mediator there. With a mediator in the variable, it means that you have to test with a mediator in the conceptual framework, sorry. With a mediator in the conceptual framework means that one intends to test the indirect relationship, stroke the mediation effect. Some people also display such a conceptual framework. Do you see the difference? This one has the mediator, but the way it's constructed is different from this one. Why? In this particular model, there are 2 independent variables here, and this particular one has 1 independent variable. And still, what do the arrows mean? The arrows mean the intention to test for the direct relationship and the indirect relationship. So when we look at your research objectives, we expect to see these appearing, the direct relationships and the indirect, okay? All right, this is like the first one. What about this one? What do the arrows mean? Now here, I want to take you back to this. Do you see there's an arrow moving from intellectual capital to competitive advantage, then to financial performance? Competitive advantage in this particular conceptual framework is a mediating variable. It mediates the relationship between IC and FP. It mediates relationship, meaning that for you to see improvement in financial performance, intellectual capital affects financial performance through competitive advantage, or it can have that direct relationship. Okay, so for the mediator, we are saying this, that one surfaces through the other. Okay, but what about this particular one? We see there are two arrows, one arrow pointing directly onto the other. Now, this is a presentation, diagrammatic presentation of a moderated variable, moderated conceptual framework. This is a moderated model. Managerial expertise being the moderator. So if you've conceptualized, or if your intention is to test moderating effects, that arrow must touch onto the arrow of the relationship that you want to test for moderation. Because this arrow here, you're saying that it moderates the relationship between workforce diversity and organizational effectiveness. That's what you're trying to say here, okay? You're trying to say that, yes, there is a relationship between workforce diversity and organizational effectiveness. However, this relationship can be modified by the existence of managerial expertise. So a moderating effect can either reduce, it can either weaken that relationship between workforce diversity and organization effectiveness, or strengthen. Yeah, it can either weaken that relationship or strengthen, depending on what you will get out from the field. But the role of this moderating variable here is to modify that relationship. So it goes back to what you want to study, what do you want to investigate, what was your conceptualization? Yeah, what was your conceptualization? What do you want to explain in your study? Okay, so do you want to test for moderation? Do you want to test for mediation? Do you want to have to test a linear relationship? What do you want? Do not force boxes and arrows just to have a cobweb of something of a sort. Friends on the call, at the end of the day, whatever conceptual framework you come up with, remember it has an implication on the methodology and the data analysis you are going to perform. So it's not a matter of just putting arrows moving left, right, and center. The arrows have implication. How have you drawn your arrow? Now, much as I put the moderator on top there, you could place it down with the arrow, so long as the arrow touches on the arrow showing relationship between two other variables. Okay, I'm going to show you another one. What about that for the ambitious students? This is a moderated mediation model. moderated mediation model. The name, from the name itself, the name says it all. It means that in this particular conceptual framework, the moderator, the role of the moderator is to modify the mediation effects. Modify the mediation effect. Here, modify the linear effect, the linear relationship, sorry. In this particular one, managerial expertise is modifying the linear relationship between workforce diversity and organizational effectiveness. But then in this particular one, supportive school climate is modifying the mediation effect of student engagement in the relationship between prevalence of teasing and bullying and academic performance. So what is it that you set out to study, to investigate, to test, to explain? What is it? It's not a matter of just drawing arrows left, right, and center. All arrows have an implication. The arrows may mean direct relationship being tested. The arrows may mean indirect relationship being tested. The arrows may mean mediation effects, may mean moderation effects, may mean moderated mediation effects. That's what I can say. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Professor Rolla. We are still on the conceptual framework.
I'm not going to remove.
Don't remove. We have 3 questions on the same. Number 1 is what is an intervening variable? We have talked about mediation and moderation. Somebody is saying, is an intervening variable different from moderation and mediation? That is question number 1. Question number 2, how do you interpret double-barreled arrows? Arrows that, I thought those are double-barreled arrows. That's the arrows that face both sides. Question number 3, some schools say that when one arrow crosses another, it is mathematically indicates something. Is that true, that arrows should not cross one another in the model? Those are 3 issues that now are emerging from the discussion of conceptual frameworks. Back to Professor Rolla and other team members.
Thank you, moderator, and thank you for those questions that have been raised. I'm going to request for support from my colleagues. I want to answer the question on double-arrowed, a double-barreled arrow, meaning if I can just do that here. If I had an arrow like that, yeah? If I had an arrow like that, it means that you're saying that while attitude can influence intention, intention can also influence attitudes. As simple as that. But then it has an implication on the analysis that you're performing. You know, when you're coming up with a conceptualization, have at the back of your mind what story you want to tell at the end of the day. What story do you want to tell at the end of the day? Double-barreled arrow means the relationship can occur in either way. Is that what you want to tell us? Is that the information that you want to test, investigate? Okay. What is an intervening variable? I've mentioned moderating and mediating. You know, there's that confusion of what intervenes. That's why for me, I always prefer being safe with the moderating variable or mediating variable. Some people, some books, some scholars, some researchers say an intervening variable is a mediating variable. It can also be called a mediating variable. But if you dig deeper, a moderating variable could also intervene. So to avoid that confusion, why not work straight away with moderating variable and mediating variable? Because there, when you use those concepts, the names of those concepts, the message is very clear. The message is very clear. One, you are looking at the conduit path, that's for the mediation. And then for the other, you are looking at the modification part. What is it that you want to investigate? All right. Then there's the issue of arrows crossing the other, having an implication, and so forth. I invite support from my colleagues. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you, Dr. Susan, the economist, Dr. Susan, Dr. Ruth, and other panelists there, senior colleagues. Is there anybody who can give support to Professor on the issue of arrows supporting one another? Does it really mathematically mean that there's some other underlying interpretation? Yes. Any panelists who can look at that?
Chair?
Yes, Dr. Susan.
I do not get it when one says arrows. What do you mean crossing each other? As a plus or moving in a
like this one here, I think.
Like that one, on, yes.
Crossing, you know, moving across this one down here to touch the other one.
Doesn't this, or when you see looking at prevalence of teasing and bullying, the relationship from prevalence to student engagement, and then when you look at supportive school climate, isn't this related to the moderating variable? It's like you're saying supportive school climate moderates the relationship between prevalence of teasing and student engagement. Is that what you meant here? So
Dr.
what
Susan,
cross is there?
Dr. Susan?
Cross, yes?
The student, I think, is saying that when the arrow of supportive school climate, one of those arrows, crosses the arrow that is coming from prevalence to academic performance, that point of intersection communicates something mathematically. Is that true?
I don't think so.
Good.
Because the pointer is what tells us. The pointer. But this crossing is because there was no way we could draw it outside. To me, this has no meaning. It's the pointer that has a meaning. Where is the arrow going?
Okay, yeah. Doctor.
I don't know the.
Yes, Dr. Michael?
Yeah.
Yeah. Doctor.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Michael.
I'm not from mathematics, but what I also know is that, and that's why I like this platform. You have people from different backgrounds, and you find that different subject domains emphasize some things, and even when you talk about like even some of the discussions we are talking about, conceptual framework, theoretical framework, if we got the traditional domain disciplines, sometimes some things are applied differently. Even when you go from different university to another university, they can explain the same thing differently. But I think for the sake of this engagement, my basic understanding and what I know is that the major intention of the arrows is that to show us the direction of the relationship, and in some instances, even the strength of the relationship. And like especially structural question modeling, and even the reason why we go into structural question modeling is because, like, especially I'm now talking about the arrows which point both sides, is that you are able to see, because in reality, by the way, you can find that the IV is influencing the DV, and subsequently DV also influences the what? The IV. So I think the arrows which point both sides is basically an emphasis that whereas this is influencing the other also influences the other. But for now, I believe that the presentation which professor has presented could suffice. But of course, maybe when we go deeply into subject-specific issues, you could find that interpretations differ. And that's why I liked Dr. Susan's argument about economics. In some universities, by the way, when you talk about a theoretical model, they talk about a different thing. So, but I don't want us to delve into those discussions now because controversies might come. But I think maybe something for us to reflect further. But as far as most of the interactions which I've had, it doesn't have a consequence. Thank you so much.
All right.
Michael, would you want to say something on intervening variable?
Okay, thank you. Of course, people have tried to talk about them differently, but one thing I'm fairly clear about is the moderating variable, which I think more applicable. But the intervening variables, the people who have tried to talk about it as interfering, more or less like a negative perspective. But moderating, trying to modify, like for instance, I think one of the scholars has argued that when he gives an example, that a moderating variable is like if an athlete is training, and then as he's training, but also taking glucose, so the mere fact that the glucose can be able to improve on his performance, so in a way it tries to moderate his performance. So the people who have tried to talk about intervening, but that they look at it as a variable which normally, instead of acting as improving, but it complete disfigures the intention of the IV, the influence of the IV and the DV. And of course, like there are contradictions in that, but the great view is that if you identify an intervening variable and identify a moderating variable, then you should study all of them, because the moderating effect needs to be established, or the intervening effect needs to be established. That's the far I could be able to go. Thank you.
Okay.
May I say something?
Yes, Dr. Susan.
Just like Professor has said, many researchers use the word intervening, synonymous with mediating. As I explained about the mediator, that is a variable that it is affected by the independent variable, and then that effect is transmitted to the dependent variable through the intervening variable. I think also the different schools of thought prefer certain either using intervening or mediating. I think if you read most of the economics papers, they will be using the intervening variable, while others use mediating variable. So they are used synonymously in many cases, the mediating and the intervening variable. I wanted something to say, I had something to say about the conceptual framework that Professor Laura presented, as good as it was. I noticed that in some scholars prefer when you present the conceptual framework, you also, as you show the direction, the arrows, give the direction of the relationship, you could also highlight on the hypothesis, that you would state about the relationship between the variables. So some scholars prefer in your conceptual framework, as you show the direction of the relationship, which one is dependent, which one is intervening, which one is independent, which one is moderating. You also indicate the hypothesis, the suggested hypothesis.
I think, thank you. You are done, Dr. Susan?
Yeah.
Okay, your conclusion leads me to a question on hypothesis. And somebody is saying that what is the best way to write the hypothesis? Under what circumstances can a researcher write a null hypothesis? Under what circumstances can the researcher write a null hypothesis? I don't know whether I can combine them with on for objectives, or we can deal with that one only. We can deal with the objectives maybe later, if time allows. So I can begin with you, Dr. Susan. We can begin with that. What is the best way to write a hypothesis? And under what circumstances can one determine, can the researcher write or use a null hypothesis? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I guess I hope, and I'm thinking this platform keeps admitting people. We could be having people who have been here for some time and they've gained from discussions. And of course, I guess they invite others and it keeps rolling and we get new people. Am I right, Chair?
You are very, very right. Very, very right.
Thank you so much. So sometimes I guess some questions arise from new members joining. So they find we have already discussed extensively, but because they've just joined, their questions will keep coming up. I think you should bear that in mind. Hypothesis, I would assume everyone knows what a hypothesis is. You're trying to give an idea or proposal or some explanation about something that you think has maybe limited evidence, and you need to, based on facts, so that you are able to prove this. So one, we need to know that a hypothesis that is stated, or this idea that you're presenting, it must be proven through facts. And we do that through direct testing and evidence. And knowing that hypothesis is a foundation of future research, it's important that when you're writing your hypothesis, first, you should ask yourself a question. What do you want what are you trying to present, or what are you trying to explore? And then, of course, you gather the preliminary information, and then you can try to formulate the answer. And it's from here that you write the hypothesis. And of course, make sure that it brings out what you want. Before I talk about either null or whatever hypothesis, the hypothesis must be specific, it must be testable, and it should be falsifiable. It should be specific, means it should be clear, and you must be clear on what you want to assess. It should be complete. Should involve the who. Who are the stakeholders here, and what is involved. You must be very specific about the expected outcome. So in specifying your hypothesis, you must say, what do you want to assess? Who? Okay, are they employees, for example? What is involved in this study? You're stating the different variables of interest, and it should be very specific with the expected outcomes. How do you get all this? Through literature review and theory. This will inform you about the specificity of the hypothesis that you want to write. And if, for example, you can say employee output has a direct relationship with the salary earned. This is a hypothesis, but it's considered to be loose because it's not very clear. It has employee, the who, the direct relationship with the salary. Those are other what is involved, but it's not giving us the outcome, expected outcome. So if you stated employee performance has a direct positive relationship with the salary earned, probably that would be good. It would be better. Or if you stated employee performance has no direct positive relationship with the salary earned. So you must be specific and clear. It should be also provable and testable. You should be able to have the data that you're going to use to test the hypothesis. You could use quantitative method or other methods for you to be able to prove. You must be able to prove this claim that you're making. And if, for example, you stated your hypothesis like there are various factors or unknown and undetectable factors that affect employee performance, we always make those statements. So if you already say that they are unknown and undetectable, then it means we can't test it because we can't detect them. Neither can we know. We need the data. We need something that is observable. So, and they should be disprovable or falsifiable, meaning that we always work towards testing a hypothesis and prove it's true. But that's not enough. We should also be able to disprove it, given the data that we get. So these are key issues that or attributes of a good hypothesis. So for example, you could say employee performance has a direct positive relationship with the salary earned. We would be able to collect the data, test and confirm if it's true, or reject given the results that we'll get. So hypotheses, they should be aligned in with your objectives. Probably you need to note, we are going to talk about objectives. You need to note that you could have more than one hypothesis depending on the kind of objective that you have stated. If your objective is specific, then you have one hypothesis. Otherwise, if it's some objectives encompass so many variables, so you end up stating so many hypotheses. But at the moment, these are the three issues you should look at when you're writing a hypothesis. It should be specific, it should be testable, and it should be disprovable. It's not an issue, a must that we should agree with the hypothesis, or if it says reject, we should reject it. So on that, I think I can stop there. Meanwhile, I don't know if I should go ahead to when to state the null hypothesis.
I think we deal with that, then members can comment also on the same. When should somebody use a null hypothesis?
The question is, what is a null hypothesis? If you look at the previous example, I mentioned that employee performance has a direct positive relationship with the salary earned. Here we are stating a positive, I can say a positive kind of hypothesis. It could be negating or the negative side, where we say employee performance has no direct positive relationship. So you find you must have come across that. So depending on different schools of thought, stating the null, some schools of thought prefer the null, others prefer what we call the alternatives. And in research, the hypothesis, we start with the assumption that, or claim that a relationship of some kind exists between variables. When we are studying variables or carrying out research, we have that in mind, that claim or hypothesis that the relationship of some kind exists between the variables. However, the null negates or states the opposite, that no such relationship exists, okay? From some schools of thought, the statement of the null is a negative statement. Null hypotheses, you know, they might sound not good, but they provide a background for discussion other than stating the positive way. So if you look at in many cases, we state a hypothesis that we are working towards supporting, that we want to support. And of course, we conclude by saying, hey, this hypothesis is supported. And in many cases, this is interpreted as an alternative hypothesis. An alternative hypothesis is that is experimental. It can either be directional or non-directional. And this is where a hypothesis that one seeks to support. But the null will look at the negative, the no side. If, for example, you expect to have the difference in performance of the two groups, if you have two groups, the null will state that there is no difference. So you state the null as a hypothesis that you intend to reject. Otherwise, the alternative is the one you intend to support. So in many cases, we state the alternative and we are calling it the null, yet we want our research to support that hypothesis. I don't know if I'm a bit clear there. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Suz. Panelists and senior colleagues on the panel, comments on the same question, use of different types of hypotheses. What could be your view?
Okay, doctor, can I say something?
Yes, Dr. Michael.
Okay, thank you so much. I think Susan has really properly. The issue is that I like going by one of the scholars who says that An hypothesis, an educated guess. So it's an educated guess. Is you're guessing a situation based on information. Let us talk about maybe like a theory which was advanced and put an hypothesis. But now when you review literature, especially contemporary literature, it clearly shows you that that preposition is no longer holding. Then you now have to state a null hypothesis. That's the way I would see it. But of course, also there are some, like some of the things are very debatable, especially in the field of academia. Academics sometimes choose to take different directions. There are also other scholars who believe that you just state an hypothesis, whatever you find, if you find the contrary, then it's a finding anyway. But I would normally go by the proponents who believe that an hypothesis, an educated guess, is a proposition which is informed by literature. So based on the circumstance, so you now choose the contrary direction given the fact that the circumstances are no longer holding. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Michael. Any other comment from the panelists on the hypothesis, especially when do we use the null hypothesis? When do we use the null hypothesis? Anyone comment? Then we can proceed. Okay, Dr. Ruth at Haire, your hand is up.
I don't know, but the question itself, when do we use a null hypothesis? A hypothesis has two, it's either null or alternative, and it depends on your topic. If your topic is one-sided, you're looking at an increasing in something, there the null will be the opposite of the, to be now decreasing, then the alternative will be increasing. If your topic does not show direction, that is now two-sided, where your level of significance will be divided by 2. If it is so, for any study, when you're concluding, you must show that too. Maybe when you're in chapter 1, when you're writing your hypothesis down, just to state the null, but at the end you must state both. I don't know. Let me first a disclaimer. We may be having different schools of thought from the area I studied from. That's a disclaimer. Thank you, Doctor.
Yes, Professor, sorry, Dr. Ruth, you are on the right track. I mean, we are coming from different schools of thought, and we come from different backgrounds, and that's why a panel normally is required for debate and discussion. But your argument is very interesting, of actually having even hypothesis at the end. I don't know. Any comment on the issue of hypothesis before we proceed?
Chair,
Yes,
if I may add something, just like Dr. Ruth mentioned, I also mentioned it. If you note, in many cases, we drive hypotheses from theory and empirical literature. So after reviewing theory and empirical literature, we get to have conclusions where we drive the hypothesis. And that way we drive the hypothesis. So either you write the hypothesis in such a way that you want to support it, you want to find evidence to support that hypothesis according to the theory or the literature that you've reviewed, or you state in such a way that you want to reject, okay, the known, okay, you want to reject. So when you state in a negative, for example, if you're carrying out, I'm just giving an example, an experiment. You have a control group where you're administering for a drug and the other group. So the first presumption here is that there will not be a change, a significant difference between the two groups, those that who have got and those who have not got. And that is taken as the null. But if you want to predict that there will be a significant difference between the two groups, okay, then it means you're working towards supporting that statement. So I hope I'm clear there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Susan Watundu, for that supplement on the issue of hypothesis. Right, we are moving, and our next issue now on discussion, there is a question. I hope hypotheses are well covered now. If you look into the questions and responses from people, we have covered the hypothesis. Then I think there's something, Professor Roller, that really we need to look at. Maybe we can cover up one issue today and another one. What should be the emphasis? What should be emphasized in the statement of the problem? And what are the core issues that we need to look at in the statement of the problem, statement of the opportunity? In the interest of time, Professor Ola, my thinking would be that we focus on the statement of the problem today. Then we can capture issues of statement of the opportunity maybe next week or in the upcoming discussions. Professor Ola, statement of the problem.
Thank you, moderator. Statement of the problem. What was the question again?
The question is saying, Professor, that statement of the problem, okay, what should be emphasized in the statement of the problem? And
okay. First of all, statement of the problem. What should be emphasized is in that very, very, should I say, statement itself. It's saying statement of the problem. Statement of the problem. What is the problem that you want to go out and investigate? What is a problem that you want to give explanations for? What is the problem there that needs to be addressed? The problem could be practical, could be theoretical, whatever the issue there is. What is the problem? Okay, so when you're writing your problem statement or statement of the problem, basically your write-up should be around that issue of concern. It could be an issue of concern, it could be an issue of controversy, you know, it could be an issue of conflict, a problem there that is, you know, you are itching deep down there to provide solutions, to give pointers into having that issue resolved. So when we talk about problem statement, we are basically saying this is a statement showing someone that the problem exists. That the problem exists. Is it financial performance? So what is wrong out there in terms of financial performance? Is it academic performance? What is it? I hear some people may have different views, but in my journey this far, the problem statement should be rotating around the dependent variable. That's why we call it dependent variable. It depends on other factors. It depends on other factors. So if you are going out to explain why small businesses are not performing well, there are other factors that bring about this. But when it comes to writing a problem statement, you just tell us what is wrong in terms of performance. What is wrong out there? What is wrong? What is the problem? So state it clearly in a way that a reader will be able to see that actually a problem exists. And actually, there is a magnitude. If care is not taken, something will happen, okay? So a problem statement, a clear statement that the problem exists, provide evidence that supports the existence of the problem. You're talking about small businesses not performing well. Where are you getting this from? What source supports this? Are you acting on rumors? So have evidence that supports the existence of the problem. And now this is where most students find big problems. Getting the evidence to support what they want to say. Always start with something that is existing there instead of forging its existence, then you fail to get its support. Make sure. That's why I say literature review, much as it comes as either chapter 2 or chapter 3 of your book, literature review starts here when you're looking for the problem that exists that you want to go and investigate. That's where literature review starts from. Where are you going to get the problem and its supporting evidence? It's from review of literature. There are different sources. It could be from areas of further studies in other people's dissertation thesis. It could be from the newspapers. It could be from the company reports, other records, other publications. So what am I saying? That whatever you are saying as an existing problem must have support that actually this problem exists. Provide evidence of an existing trend, especially people who talk about financial performance. Financial performance in your problem statement, so a reader should be able to see that over the last 3 years, things are not well, things are not going right. Yeah. Provide a trend, convince us that there is actually a problem that needs attention. Okay. So what am I saying? I'm saying that first, a problem must exist. There must be support. There must be a trend. Yeah. Then also there must be a clear context, study setting, financial performance amongst businesses, academic performance among university students, academic performance among ICT students. Study context. One must be able to see it. Because you may sit down, conceptualize, and say you're going to look at sustainability practices. Sustainability practices where? What is the study context? So if you say sustainability practices among women entrepreneurs, okay, fine. But does that problem exist? Do you have supporting evidence? Is there a trend that problem, you know, for someone to be convinced that there's actually a problem worth investigating, worth, you know, being looked into? Okay. Then also, why should we care? Why should we care? What are the probable causes? Now, when you're now highlighting the probable causes, here you're bringing in what has been studied, you know, what has been studied and what are those factors that you're pulling out exactly to investigate in your particular study. So, in short, what I'm saying, when you're looking at problem statement, seek to answer these questions. Number one, what? The what question. What is wrong out there? What is wrong out there? Now, to answer this, it must be based on your DV, dependent variable. What is wrong out there? What shows? What shows? Yeah. First question is, what is wrong out there? Second question is, what shows that it's even wrong? In answering the second question, you must align this with your conceptual framework. Remember, in the conceptual framework, you are going to have a certain box there for your dependent variable. You have the name of the dependent variable. Below, you have some constructs and so forth. What shows? The question what shows should be aligned to what you're going to put, you know, as a construct of that variable in your conceptual framework. You're looking at financial performance. One of the indicators is profits or profitability or profit levels. Okay. So in the problem statement, when you're saying that financial performance is poor, blah, 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 we expect you to mention the profit levels over a period of time. We're expecting you to mention liquidity issues over a period of time. Yeah. My point there is, in answering the what shows, pick the elements you have put in your conceptual framework as the indicators of your DV. Align, make sure your conceptual framework issues are, you know, talking to each other with a problem statement. So question number one was, what is wrong out there? What shows? Yeah, what shows? And then the next one is, says who? They're saying these businesses don't perform well. Says who? You have to give us a source of your information, a source of your assertion, because we don't want to depend on rumors. Remember that in research we use scientific methods. So scientific methods, you know, you don't just base on rumors. Everything must be supported. Says who? Why should we care? Okay, why should we care? Why we should care? I mean, if you don't care about these businesses, you know, performing poorly continuously, every time they are reporting them as, you know, why should you care about them not doing well? You must. If this problem is left unchecked, it poses a question on the country's economic development, blah, 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 blah. I expect to see that. Why should we care? Why should we care? So don't stop at only mentioning the problem. Go ahead and tell us why we should care. Otherwise, it doesn't give that urgency for us to even be bothered. Would you be bothered about something that is not going to really have impact? I mean, so why should we care? What are the probable causes? What are the probable causes? This is now where you bring in your IVs, the independent variables, maybe also the mediating or moderating variables. That's when you now bring in these other issues, okay? That's when you now bring in these others. But then you don't stop at that. You go ahead and talk about what others have done, the research gap, what others have done, what they haven't paid attention to. You don't say that no study has done this. No, because there's a lot out there and definitely you have not read everything. So you just say there's insufficient information on ABCD, bring in the research gap that the study seeks to address. Someone else is going to talk about research gap. I think because of time, we shall address that maybe in the next presentation. Yeah. And then when someone reads your problem statement, one should be able to identify the concepts you're working around clearly. One should be able to identify your orientation, your philosophical orientation. Are you a positivist? Are you an anti-positivist? Are you going to go into critical realism? All these, it must not be stated expressly, but when one reads, the person should be able to see this. It must be implied. It must be implied in your problem statement, okay? Study context must come out clearly. I already mentioned that. So those are the things that you look out for in your problem statement. What is wrong out there? What shows? Says who? Why should we care? What are the probable causes? What have others done? What is your research gap? What is your study context? What is your philosophical orientation? And so forth and so forth. That is what I can say. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Professor Robia, for that detailed presentation on statement of the problem. We have so many questions that are unanswered, and these questions have been pending, but we are running out of time. Actually, we have shot our time already. We have not talked about statement of the opportunity. We have not talked about the research gap. There was a question on significance, motivation, and others. So meaning that we may need to organize another session still on conceptual related questions that we have not answered this time. As we move towards the end, allow me to call Dr. Michael. There's only one question. I'm going to take you back, Dr. Michael. Peace to Shabe is one of our very active students who has been on the platform for quite some time. And Peace saying that she needs more clarity on propositions and hypotheses. And then after Peace, after responding to Peace, I don't know whether Dr. Musenze is still online. I'll request him to come and do a wrap up, and then we close the session. Dr. Michael, please, can you respond to Peace before we close the session?
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Doctor. I really know that this time is so small for us to deal with many issues, and any word you say could have implications and could attract again another discussion. And I was thinking maybe in the interest of time, because I don't think even if I begin highlighting more about it, it will really help now. I can talk about it next week, please, because I see, like everything, more issues are coming up and again. But maybe briefly, like I said, maybe there's something And I like the way Dr. Ruth said, you know, especially if you engage in different universities will normally have a different tradition. And especially when people from the same university come into discussion, they will generally come things which are generally agreed. But like when you keep on interacting different entities, you see the same thing said differently, and you begin appreciating why they maybe do things differently from you. And I think that's the point I wanted to end at. In some universities, you find that actual hypotheses are stated in chapter 1. In some universities, you find hypotheses are stated at the end of chapter 2, or which is basically literature review. And you find that some people will emphasize that it's stated at the end of chapter 2 with emphasis that now clearly you understand what literature is saying. But also some universities who start at the start, some anyway, some, I'm not saying all, who start at the end, at the start from chapter 1, say that you as a researcher, you must guess what is there, what is likely on the basis of these concepts which you are clearly reflecting. Is it that intrinsic motivation leads to performance? Is it that extrinsic motivation leads to performance? And then others say that no, that you can profoundly talk about this when you are concluding your literature review. But those are all dynamics you'll experience in research. But at the end of the day, what counts is that, are we adding to the body of knowledge? I think, let me stop there. I will be able to deal with that subject next week. But I know there are a lot of issues because propositions are there in most of the theories, but also at the end of the day, you are going to be able to. But I think because it's a bit broader, I will not want to touch again and then bring more confusion. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. As you earlier mentioned, we are going to give, we thought we could have maybe 3 Q&A sessions, one on conceptualization, another on methodology, and another on findings and discussion. But it seems a conceptualization needs another week of discussion. So we shall communicate in the course of the week on what to do, how to plan it. Dr. Watundu has a hand. Before we go into the closing session, Dr. Watundu has something to say. Yes, Dr. Susan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Professor Okoche. Actually, I just wanted to say that whatever he has said is true. When you read, you'll find a lot of somehow confusing about proposition, hypothesis, interchanging, and so forth. But as he also enlightened us more next time, you can also look at these are taken as nouns, what they mean. However, he mentioned something about the presentation styles of hypotheses in different universities. Some present at the end of the literature, others present in chapter 1. I hope we are talking to some students from Makerere University. You notice that Makerere University, we present them in the first chapter, but of course, you're expected to have derived them from the literature, though they are reflected here in the first chapter. In the literature that it's the order of presentation that you review should be the basis for your hypothesis testing. And like Professor Rola said, you must read literature from what go before you even start writing. You should be reading literature and writing, and then you'll be creating themes, and then you select what you need in introduction and what you need to capture in other sections. Now, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Suz, for that wonderful summary. Allow me to really appreciate the very, very big number of senior colleagues who have been able to join today, even if they have not said a lot or any, but they were ready to discuss. But in the interest of time, hopefully we shall be able to have them on next panels. Allow me appreciate Dr. Nkurunziza, Professor Chogabire, Dr. Goretti Cheyune, Dr. Edith Basalirwa, Dr. Musenze. You have done a great job, always and always. So next time, I think but thank you for being part of the sessions always. For the team that has been with us today, Dr. Susan Watundu, Dr. Ruth Atuhaire, Professor Rhoda Orobia, and Dr. Michael Okoche, thank you, and thank you very, very much. I said today we had the menu, and even the questions we had planned to discuss today, we have not finished them. Many questions are still pending. So meaning that we shall communicate whether to have another panel next week if there's nothing much really pressing. Mafumo from Zimbabwe, I didn't talk about your issue of your topic and others. I think the advice came from Bernard is right, that we may need a day for you to present your work here and see how you can be advised. If Dr. Musenze is there, allow me to invite him to give us the closing remarks and the prayer. Is Dr. Musenze Ibrahim on? Dr. Ibrahim. Okay. Dr. Goretti, are you there? Dr. Goretti, are you there? You can give us the closing remarks if you are there.
Okay. I'd like to thank you, moderator, Dr. Walgembe. I'd like to thank the team that has discussed this morning, Dr. Professor Okecho, Susan, Dr. Susan, Professor Laura. Thank you for enlightening the students and also reminding us of all those nitty-gritties about the conceptualization in research. The key points I've noted rotated around the philosophical orientation, where we started from, grounding oneself on basing on theory to generate your variables, and also get grounded with your problem statement. This has been very useful, especially for the beginners, in coming up with the right kind of study approach. I would like to thank all of you, and I pray that we meet again next Sunday to continue where we have ended, especially in the areas that have not been very clear. Otherwise, I'd like to thank our mentor who started this interaction, this platform, and all the participants every Sunday morning. In that regard, I would like to entrust ourselves to the Almighty. And I pray, Father Lord, that you continue to grant us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and the will to go further in this research interactions. And we pray that you grant us good health and energy to continue with all the obligations we have on our hands. In your name I've prayed. Amen.
Amin, thank you very much, Dr. Goretti. Members, thank you very much. Panelists, thank you very much. We missed next Sunday. And have a wonderful week.
Thank you very much, sir, and everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much.
Very, very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Next Sunday.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Invite more people next time.
Thank you, and Vincent.
If you're in Uganda,